Hello, this is going to be my review of this Vivitar action camera pictured with a few of the accessories that were included with the camera. Also, there's one more accessory that you cannot see. Okay, here it is. 64GB memory card, micro SD memory card was included. So this Vivitar action camera was included in this cool packaging, transparent, showing all the accessories. This is all detailed in a separate unboxing video on this channel. This is going to be the review. So we had this nice looking tripod, we had this cool floating handle which you can attach to the camera with by using some other accessories, and an extra battery, and of course the micro SD memory card, which is currently shown here. So what can I say about this camera? This, for the price that we purchased this camera, less than $30. Again, maybe the price will go up, I don't know, the price can fluctuate, so I'm not going to guarantee that you're going to pay less than $30. For the price that we paid, I think this is a fantastic camera because of one thing that sets this apart from many other cameras, even some more expensive, cheaper cameras, more towards the $100 range, the $50 to $100 range. Why is this $30 camera so good overall? Because of one thing. So let me explain what that is. Any cheap action camera can record decent video. That's a fact. However, not every cheap action camera has good image stabilization. Not every cheap action camera has image stabilization. And what that is that if you're walking around and filming, making your video, of course when you're walking there's going to be some shake. The image stabilization feature, which most of these cameras it's either labeled anti-shake or EIS, means that if you turn the camera, and these sharp movements, the camera will try to correct it and make it a little bit more stable. So even if you're walking, the shake will be minimized. That's why it's called anti-shake sometimes. Image stabilization, the video will look stabilized so that no matter how much you're shaking the camera, well, you try to keep it still. There should be some stabilization so that the person watching your video will not be distracted by the shakiness. So to see an image stabilization feature on this camera, which we purchased for $30, not only that, but a very good image stabilization feature, I was not only pleasantly surprised, but very impressed also. So we have many video settings, as with many cheap action cameras. The 4K resolution setting really isn't for me. I just prefer 1080p, 60 frames per second. On this camera, we have image stabilization. The image stabilization option with the 1080p setting only at 30 frames per second, but generally I use 1080p 60 frames per second. So that's really it. There's a good image stabilization feature which you can access by long pressing on the capture button, and then video resolution here, clicking on the capture button again, scrolling down using this button, and then you can see the various features, video resolution settings, some of them labeled EIS, which is image stabilization. So we have 1080p 30 frames per second. Photo quality, for some reason this camera makes all the photos look darker than they actually are. And like I said, with 4K, sometimes it's more of a marketing thing. It doesn't really make the quality look better. It's just more like, oh well, it's 4K. But 1080p 30 or 60 frames per second should be fine. 1080p 60 frames per second here. 1080p 30 frames per second will get you the image stabilization on the 1080p resolution setting. You just have to kind of scroll through the various video settings until you find something that you like. But for me personally, 1080p 60 frames per second, and with EIS we get 1080p 30 frames per second. Other than that, what can I say about this camera? It has a nice kind of rugged design, dustproof design. You can put your finger on the lens, it's not going to get dirty. You just kind of wipe any dust off with your clean finger and it should be fine. There's waterproof housing included, which I actually not showing you here. But there's a separate underwater housing which will protect the camera from the water, at least it should. Not going to guarantee it. But the underwater footage we recorded did look very good, and there was no leaking into the underwater housing. So for me with this particular device, my own experience, I'm just going to say it did perform very well recording underwater. And with the accessories included, with the 64GB memory card, overall I'm very satisfied. So to summarize, good image stabilization, good underwater housing, and clear 1080p 30 frames per second image stabilization. Even though sometimes the footage did look a little bit darker, same with the pictures. It's better to film in sunny weather with a lot of these cheap cameras. Despite that, I did like the fact that there's also another screen on the front which you can activate by, when the camera is on, just holding down this button right here to switch to the second screen. It'll be activated. I like the design of the camera. It feels very solid. I like the image stabilization. It actually did stabilize the video very well. That's my review. Video samples will follow if you're interested in seeing what the camera looks like recording underwater, and also with image stabilization. Thanks for watching this video. Have a nice day. This has been my review of this Vivitar action camera.
Hello, this is a 1080p 30 frames per second resolution video test with image stabilization. We have the Vivitar action camera right here that we purchased on Amazon recently. Holding up a mirror just so you can see what I'm recording with. Here it is again, the Vivitar action camera. And what kind of video test do we have here? 1080p resolution. 1080p resolution, 30 frames per second with image stabilization. That is the important part here. We're going to be just taking a walk here and trying to see if this camera is going to stabilize our footage again before we start walking. This is the Vivitar action camera that we're recording with. So 1080p, 30 frames per second. Image stabilization, not always great on cheap cameras such as this one. However, we're going to hopefully be pleasantly surprised. I'm always optimistic, but the result isn't always great. So the question is, does this camera have good image stabilization? Let's find out. Let's start walking. I'll let you decide for yourself. Typically when you walk around with a camera with image stabilization, with good image stabilization, you're supposed to be able to watch, the video is supposed to be watchable. You're supposed to be able to watch the video without being distracted by the shakiness. So the question is, are we going to experience that here? Well, we're trying to keep the camera still. I'm walking with flip-flops, but just keep in mind that if it's too shaky, we simply cannot watch the video, and that's when I say no, it's not good. If we're able to actually focus on the video without being distracted by the shakiness, then I will admit it's good stabilization. So that's all it really is. It's up to you. Without stabilization, everything will be very shaky. With good stabilization, the shakiness goes away enough that we can really focus on what's in front of the camera without thinking about, oh, this is shaking too much. But yeah, without image stabilization, if you're trying to walk around, forget about it. No matter how steady you hold the camera, there will be shakiness. So on a less than $30 camera, I'd be surprised to see good stabilization. I'd be surprised to see any stabilization at all. So all we're doing is just keeping the camera still and just walking around here. So what it looks like is when you move the camera, it's supposed to slowly slide into place. No kind of shaky movements going on. See? Especially when you move the camera very slowly, it's supposed to really, stabilization is supposed to kind of make up for some of that shakiness and make it look more smooth. So 1080p resolution, 30 frames per second, trying to keep the camera still while the stabilization hopefully takes care of the rest. So if you like the video, it means that you think the stabilization did a good job. If you think it's just way too shaky, like what's going on here, then it means it didn't do a good job. So, but we'll see when I transfer the footage. This is just a test. I'm not going to tell you, oh, this is good, this is bad. You have to decide for yourself. Just like I'm going to decide for myself if I like it or if I don't like it. Again, this is the Vivitar action camera. There's also an unboxing video, which may or may not be in this actual video. So lots of accessories included. A memory card was also included. And so far so good, but we're actually going to take a look at the footage and decide if this is actually good quality footage and not just some fancy packaging. Stabilization, image stabilization video test. Again, this is the Vivitar action camera recently purchased on Amazon. Here it is. This is what we're recording with. We're also going to show a regular 1080p 60 frames per second video test without the stabilization. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day. This has been an image stabilization video test with the Vivitar action camera. Hello, this is a 1080p 60 frames per second video test with the Vivitar action camera. 1080p video test, 60 frames per second. Recently purchased on Amazon. Image stabilization is also an option. Not enabled here though, just 1080p 60 frames per second video test. The name of this camera, the specific model name of this camera, will be in the title of the video. 1080p 60 frames per second. This camera records all the way up to 4K. All the way up to 4K resolution. .1080p video test, 60 frames per second. .1080p video test, 60 frames per second with the Vivitar action camera. Recently purchased on Amazon. Came with the 64GB memory card, lots of accessories. 1080p video test, 60 frames per second. .1080p video test, 60 frames per second. .1080p video test, 60 frames per second. Hello, 2.7K video test, 30 frames per second with the Vivitar action camera. 2.7K video test at 30 frames per second. .7K at 30 frames per second. This camera records all the way up to 4K. Also has image stabilization. This is a 2.7K video test at 30 frames per second. .7K video test, 30 frames per second. 2.7K video test, 30 frames per second with the Vivitar action camera. .7K video test, 30 frames per second. .4K resolution, 30 frames per second with the Vivitar action camera. 4K resolution at 30 frames per second video test. 4K resolution video test, 30 frames per second with the Vivitar action camera. Video test, 30 frames per second with the Vivitar action camera, recently purchased on Amazon. The title of this camera will be, the name of this camera, specific model name of this camera will be in the title of the video. 4K video test at 30 frames per second. Video test, 30 frames per second. Video test, 30 frames per second. Hello, this is another 1080p 30 frames per second video test. Image stabilization. Vivitar action camera, 1080p 30 frames per second. Sorry if I said 60, I mean 30. 30 frames per second. Just image stabilization video test. Very excited about this camera. It has a rugged design. Lots of accessories included, including a 64GB memory card, tripod, a floating handle. Not sure how much I'll be using these accessories, but very nice to have these, especially the memory card. And don't forget with those memory cards, it's not like you have to use that memory card with this camera. You can use it with any action camera that is compatible with a the 64GB memory card. In this particular case, we got 64. A lot of space. I mean, think about how far technology has come. Used to be that I thought that 1GB memory card was amazing. Now we have all the way up to 64, 128. I mean, technology really is amazing. So 64GB card included for our convenience. And that is the card that we have in this camera, and so far so good. I do like the image stabilization. I think it's just a really nice feature to have in general, but when it works well, it's even better. In this case, I think it's working just fine, especially for the price. Just not just pleasantly surprised, I am impressed with the image stabilization here. And I don't know if you'll feel the same way, but it's very easy to tell when a camera has poor quality image stabilization. What that means is the shakiness will be so bad that you're focusing on the shakiness instead of what's actually in the video. So I think video quality, the image stabilization quality is good here. So something you'll typically find on more expensive cheap cameras. I know it sounds weird, but more expensive cheap action cameras, meaning from the scale of $30 to $100, more closer to the $100 price, you'll find cheaper action cameras with good image stabilization. But to find it on a $30 camera, purchased it, this one, when the price was less than $30, to find it at that price is just very surprising and makes me very happy. So, but just keep in mind that we did buy this for less than $30, but the price will obviously fluctuate. So I'm not gonna say it anymore. I'm not gonna tell you, oh, you're guaranteed to get this price. Well, of course not. If it starts selling really well, maybe maybe the camera will start to cost a little bit more than the price I paid for it. Thanks for watching this video. Have a nice day. This has been a video test, the Vivitar action camera with image stabilization. So, here it is. Walking around, trying to keep the camera still. This concludes this image stabilization video test. Image stabilization video test. Yeah, it would be better, yeah. Edit. No, I don't have a mirror. sure, for sure. I mean, if it's interesting enough. Oh yeah, of course.
If I can take time, I have to really take careful. Okay. It's pretty easy to identify. No, two different things. That's why I got nervous last week. There's two cameras, different. I think so.
It's been going on for
10 minutes already. What's the film? Yeah, it looks better now. Okay,